This is the MGTOW Infinium here with another Infinium Free Talk. This Infinium Free Talk is entitled An Enforcer Simp Failure Analysis. My brothers, I'm sure you're aware by now of all the cries coming from feminists, the feminist plantation state, and women in general about where are the good men. That men are not men anymore, that men are feminine in nature. And of course, when it comes to we MGTOW men, it is we MGTOW men are demonic in nature because we are quote unquote pushing forth this notion that women do not deserve we men in their lives if they are going to continue with the destructive ideology of feminism, which is destructive to men's lives in every way possible. Now, when it gets into those cries, part of it is, of course, feminists, the feminist plantation state, and women in general want back into our lives in every way possible. But another component, my brothers, is the component which feminists, the feminist plantation state, and women in general want us to become in terms of our enslavement, and that is simps. Now, my brothers, again, you will say Infinium, that is known among we MGTOW men, that women want us to be simp slaves. They want us to participate in simping as a component of, again, having we men be pulled back into quote unquote their BS. But my brothers, I would submit to you, because of what is going on with feminism, with feminists, with the feminist plantation state and women in general, it is becoming very important to repeat these aspects of the dangers of simping and what can happen to you as a simp with dealing with these types of situations. Because again, there is amped up pressure upon women because of the losses, because of the things that they are going through. You name it, it's happening to them. There is increased pressure to get men back into the picture and get them back as simp slaves. Now, one aspect of a simp slave which should be concerning to you when you look at the aspect of simping itself is the capability of a simp to be turned into a enforcer simp. And my brothers, I will put it to you this way. If you become a simp, you will be forced to become an enforcer simp. And that is not a promotion of goodness for you. It is a promotion of something that can be quite deadly to you in every way possible. And again, because of the pressures upon feminism, the feminist plantation state, and women in general, the likelihood of a simp becoming an enforcer simp is very high. Now, when you are a simp, it is dangerous to your life. But it is even more dangerous to your life if you are transformed into an enforcer simp, because the possibility of you losing everything that you can think of because of your being an enforcer simp is higher than a regular simp. And again, the pressure to be transformed from a regular simp into an enforcer simp is very, very high because of what is going on in this hour. So therefore, again, there is no aspect about simping which is good for a man, and in particular for a MGTOW man who knows about his freedom. My brothers, here is an analysis of what typically happens to enforcer simps when they are caught up in situations where they have to perform and they fail. In the use of this content, I cite fair use policies. Here now is the analysis, which involves Serene Afkari and Christian Buckman, who were asked to leave a restaurant because they were inebriated and being disruptive.
Please leave.
Tell me one more time.
Leave the restaurant. I did not touch it. Please leave the restaurant.
He's a liar.
I just tried it out. Roberto.
Here, instead of doing the right thing by complying with the request to leave the restaurant, and as par for the course, instead of Quietly leaving the restaurant, Shireen decides to escalate the matter, and because of that, Christian becomes the enforcer simp who has to back her up in terms of her actions. As you can see, she has the typical profile of the quote-unquote the powerful feminist woman who is in charge of things. She pulls out her smartphone, she starts to record, she becomes more boisterous, and as a result, she is caught up in a situation which is a back and forth between patrons of the restaurant and the restaurant staff. Now, at this point, Christian has two options, either to continue backing her up or to pull the ejection handles on the situation and bail out. And that is to just get out of the situation, leave the restaurant, and let Shireen be faced with the consequences of her actions. But he does not have the option to do so because he is caught up in the role of being an enforcer simp and thereby being caught up in her BS, so to speak. As a result, Christian has a confounded look on his face. He is ineffectual with his actions in terms of protecting Shireen, and this only compounds what happens to Christian at the end of this segment.
Get out the way. Get out the way. Let's go.
Now, as you can see, Shireen gets body slammed, and then both Shireen and Christian get forcibly ejected from the restaurant.
Let go, let go, let go, right now. Let go, 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 let go. No, let go right now.
But even still, Shireen continues to escalate the matter by fighting with the restaurant staff and the other patrons of the restaurant who ejected her from the restaurant, thereby causing her enforcer simp, Christian, to be further caught up in the matter in terms of battling with the patrons of the restaurant as well as the restaurant staff.
Let go. Please let go.
I'm not touching your boy.
Okay, stop.
No, he's on his phone.
No.
Hey.
No te pases conmigo. ¡Buscaste, mujer! ¡Se lo buscaste!
Guys. No, stop, guys. Guys. No, guys. Stop. No, stop.
But as you can see here, she continues to attack the bartender where she was pulling his hair by going after him to try to attack him again. But he ends up tripping her and she gets slammed down to the ground on her face. Now, at this point, you see her attacking Christian, who is again the enforcer simp, because he failed to protect her. And she is openly criticizing him, saying he is worthless, blah, blah, blah. But again, because he is locked into the role of being a enforcer simp, and in his mind as an enforcer simp, he has no other options, even though logically he actually did have the option to bail out on Shireen and let her face the consequences of her actions. He had the opportunity to either walk away and let her face her consequences or try to play that role as the enforcer simp, which he failed. And he failed in both protecting her and he failed in her rise because she failed to control the situation. She failed because of her BS to control the situation, and therefore he is at fault for what happened to her. Now let's look at some considerations based upon this analysis. The first consideration is a total loss of dignity and respect. For Christian Buckman, his loss of dignity and respect started initially when Shireen, instead of leaving the restaurant peacefully, began to amp up the situation. He lost control of that situation at the point of her amping up the situation, thereby causing him to initially lose dignity and respect. And from that point on, his dignity and respect went downhill because of Shireen's actions, and also because he was unable to control her in terms of her actions. Now, when you factor in Christian's inability to control the situation, to stop Shireen in terms of her actions, this only amps up his loss of dignity and respect in so much that it makes him look weak as a man and also weak as a enforcer simp. It also compounds what happens to him at the end of the incident, where Shireen gets slammed down into the ground, which causes her to attack him and blame him for what happened to her. It should be noted as well that as an enforcer simp loses his dignity and respect in situations like this, they will start acting in a manner which is unwise, or in other words, not using wisdom and applying that wisdom to the situation. So if you look at it this way, Christian Buckman had an opportunity to either try to control Shireen initially, and if she would not respond to his trying to control her, him trying to calm the situation down by him taking her out of the restaurant quietly, he should have immediately used wisdom and walked away from Shireen and left her face the consequences of her actions. Instead, because of what was going on and because of the pressures of being a enforcer simp, Christian continued to fight with the restaurant staff and the other patrons of the restaurant, resulting in him and Shireen getting thrown out of the restaurant and then fighting on the street with the staff of the restaurant and the patrons of the restaurant. And furthermore, chasing Shireen down the street where she gets tripped and slammed down to the ground on her face by one of the restaurant employees. That again is an inability to use wisdom in a situation like that, which is a factor of a loss of dignity and respect. As well, the lack of wisdom in itself could have resulted in both Shireen and Christian being physically injured or killed because of what was going on, because of the nature of the fight that they were in. They were clearly overwhelmed. They were clearly outmatched in what they were doing. And there again, that is a lack of wisdom, along with a loss of dignity and respect that happened in a situation because of Christian Buckman being a enforcer simp, where he totally failed in his role as a enforcer simp. A second consideration is an increased likelihood of a repeat incident. Now, if we do some extrapolation in terms of the aftermath of that incident in the restaurant, where Shireen and Christian are thrown out of the restaurant and fully embarrassed, you can look at two options here that Christian Buckman has in terms of him either continuing his role as a enforcer simp or cutting his ties with Shireen Afkari because she is a detriment to him in terms of the relationship that they have. Now, if he takes the second option in terms of walking away from Shireen, he is better off in terms of doing so because he's left with the embarrassment of the restaurant situation, but he can go and deal with his issues in terms of how he should not be a simp or an enforcer simp. However, if he takes the first option in terms of continuing his relationship with Shireen and continuing his role as an enforcer simp, he will likely face another incident like what happened in the restaurant. But this incident will be far worse than the incident in the restaurant. This is because Shireen's efforts to prove herself as a boss babe who can control situations, who can control whole restaurants, any type of business, whatever, will be amped up. And as well, Christians need to prove himself as a valuable enforcer simp will also be amped up. And so you can extrapolate from there what will happen to Shireen and Christian. They will both find themselves in a situation like what happened with the restaurant, but far worse, and with far worse consequences, like either being arrested or being killed. As well, this will further compound Christian's initial failure in the first restaurant incident, in so much that he failed to use wisdom in that situation and failed to use wisdom in this situation, which by extrapolation will happen if he continues with his relationship with Shireen. The other aspect of that failure to use wisdom is the failure to understand what Shireen is. Shireen is a malignant, narcissistic woman who, because of feminism, thinks that she can control situations, control the outcomes of situations because of her quote-unquote power and capability given to her by feminism and the feminist plantation state. Now, just on the basis of Shireen being a malignant, narcissistic woman, you can look at the example of what happened to Sha'Carri Richardson and Christian Coleman in terms of Sha'Carri Richardson being also a malignant, narcissistic woman. In 2025, Sha'Carri Richardson was arrested in the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport because of her abuse of Christian Coleman. There are plenty of videos out now which show how Sha'Carri was abusing Christian Coleman, how she was trying to throw him under the bus, how she was trying to get him arrested for her abuse of him. Christian Coleman, for his part in the matter, also did not use wisdom in terms of what Sha'Carri Richardson did to him, because he could have pressed charges on her because of her abuse. Christian Coleman, for his part, also did not use wisdom in terms of pressing charges against Sha'Carri because he simped out. He chose the role of, I don't want her to go to jail. And that is a typical simp response, which happens to simps when they are abused by women like Sha'Carri Richardson, Shireen Afkari, and so forth. Now, because of what happened in the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, two things happened to Christian. Number one, it was his continued simping out. And number two, he was transformed from a regular simp to an enforcer simp. Now, when you factor in what happened to Christian Coleman, you will see what happens to him with the second incident, like with Shireen and Christian Buckman, if Christian Buckman decides to stay with Shireen in a relationship. Now, on January 29th of 2026, Sha'Carri Richardson was caught speeding in Orange County, Florida. She was going 104 miles an hour in a 65-mile-an-hour zone. That is an automatic arrest. And so there are videos out of her trying to incoherently babble about how she didn't mean to speed, how she had a tire that was running low on air, all these types of things. Again, the boss babe type of response to try to control the situation, to try to talk her way out of the situation. Now, again, the offense that she committed on the highway was an arrestable offense. And so again, because Christian Coleman decided to continue to be in a relationship with an abusive, malignant, narcissistic woman, where it was proven that she was abusing him, where it was proven that he had the right to press charges on her because of her abuse, he became transformed into an enforcer simp. And so what resulted with the second offense that Sha'Carri committed, Christian Coleman comes out to the scene and gets arrested because he was trying to intervene and save Sha'Carri from being arrested and so forth. That, my brothers, is what will happen to Christian Buckman if he decides to stay in a relationship with Shireen Afkari. In both cases, the likelihood of a second incident happening is very high, and the likelihood of damaging types of things happening to you as a man are also very high. Christian Coleman has to deal with now an arrest record and having to fight that arrest record. A third consideration is you will, as a enforcer simp, reap what you sow. Now, my brothers, to be clear, simping in any form is not good for men. You will always fail as a simp, and you will always have the consequences of simping. But my brothers, it is even worse if you are an enforcer simp and engage in tactics and activities of an enforcer simp. So for instance, you, because of being involved with a malignant, narcissistic woman who you are trying to prove yourself as a valuable enforcer simp, an enforcer simp who is worthy of her appreciation, of your dedication as an enforcer simp. So for example, because of your need to prove yourself as a valuable enforcer simp to the woman who you are in relationship with, you may engage in immoral, unethical, or illegal types of behavior which can get you into trouble, into deep trouble, because of what will happen to you. And that is when the woman who you are in relationship with has no more need of you as an enforcer simp. Now, this can happen in two ways. The first way is she finds that the only way that she can get out of the situation that she finds herself in, like the enforcers of the feminist plantation state banging on her door early in the morning because she has committed PPP loan fraud, for instance, is to throw you under the bus to keep herself from being put in jail. The other way is in a discard phase, when she discards you as an enforcer simp. And the same thing, she will find a way to throw you under the bus. But in the case of the discard phase, it is any type of activity, any type of behavior, anything that you did, my brothers, as an enforcer simp, which can be used against you. Not just a need for her to get the heat off of her because of a crime that she committed. It is anything and everything which can be taken into account in the discard phase. So, for instance, if you engaged in activities like gang stalking against a victim of the woman who you are in relationship with, she can take that behavior and use that in a court of law when she decides to discard you as an enforcer simp. She can get before the judge and cry and boo-hoo and babble incoherently about how you engaged in gang stalking, how you gang stalked a victim, and how she basically told you not to do so when in fact she is lying, and in fact she is getting over on the court system in her effort to get rid of you as an enforcer simp, which this will result, my brothers, in you going to jail because of an activity that you engaged in based upon your desire to please the woman who you are being an enforcer simp for. Again, any and every activity which you engage in as an enforcer simp, which is unethical, which is immoral, which is illegal, can and will be held against you in a court of law by a woman who you formerly acted in a role as an enforcer simp for because of her need to get rid of you. This can be done to you. And because of that, my brothers, you will reap what you sow in terms of your activity as an enforcer simp for a woman who you thought you could please in that type of role. My brothers, aside from these three main considerations, it must be understood that there is great incentive to get men to simp in this hour. It is not just we MGTOW men, it is all men. My brothers, also, it is the understanding that simping in any form is highly dangerous to men, and in particularly in this hour because of what will happen to many men who return to simping, start simping, whatever, my brothers. It is what will happen to those simps in this hour. It is because of what is going on within feminism, within the feminist plantation state, and women in general. Again, because of the losses, because of the great devastating things that are going on, men who simp in this hour will likely be transformed into enforcer simps. Again, simping in any form, whether it be just a regular simp all the way to a enforcer simp, is dangerous to men who engage in that activity. Furthermore, there is no nobility to simping in any form, whether it be a regular simp to an enforcer simp. The only thing that a simp will find is failure and destruction because of his simping. And that is why, again, my brothers, you must ignore every call from feminists, the feminist plantation state, and women in general for you to give up your freedom as MGTOW men for the slavery of simping. Simping in any form will destroy a man's life, and it should be recognized that the freedom of the MGTOW philosophy will prevent that destruction from entering into your life because of your embracement of said philosophy and as well your determination to be free as a MGTOW man. This is the MGTOW Infinium, and this has been an Infinium Free Talk. My MGTOW brothers, as always, stay safe, stay strong, stay on the MGTOW path, and remember, MGTOW is the liberation of men's minds. MGTOW cannot and will not be stopped.